Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We warmly welcome you to the session. Before we begin, I would like to say a little bit about our topic today. So there seems now to be a growing interest and awareness of mental health issues here in Indonesia. And as people who study psychology, it is of great importance for all of us to understand um, how psychopathology develops and manifests itself. So I'm 100% certain that today's session will be very interesting for all of us. And today we are joined by our respectable speaker, Professor Naved Iqbal, PhD. Hello, Prof. Naved. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You can continue, please.
Yes. How are you? How are you, sir?
Sorry?
How are you? How are you doing?
I am fine. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good too. Yeah, it's so it is very nice and also such an honor for all of us to have you here join with us. And now I would like to formally introduce you to the audience today. Just give me a second. I would like to slideshow. And yeah, so this is the profile of our respectable speaker of the day. So Prof. Naved Iqbal, PhD, is a professor in psychology at Jamia, Millia, Islamia, New Delhi, India. And I could safely say that he is a very knowledgeable expert in the field of clinical and health psychology. He has been joining Jamia Millia Islamia as a lecturer since 1994 and was appointed as a professor since 2009. So he has had 27 years of teaching experience. That is very wonderful. His areas of interest include spirituality, well-being, mental health intervention studies, and the Islamic perspective on psychology. He has supervised 22 PhD students and over 100 master's students and published numerous journal articles that I can't mention one-on-one here. I just listed a few recent publications here, but he has written a lot of articles. So it is truly, again, an honor to have Prof. Iqbal here with us today. And in today's lecture, he will talk about the biological and psychodynamic paradigm in psychopathology. And one more thing before we get to the lecture, I would like to invite all of the audience today to keep your camera on if possible and your mic off during the lecture. If you have any questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end where you can raise your hand or ask your question or to ask your question or simply type them out in the chat box and we will read them out for you later. And if you are watching this lecture from on YouTube, you can also type down your questions in the live chat box and we will get them later. And now, without further ado, I would like to hand over the session to our speaker. We have around 50 to 60 minutes, Professor Iqbal, for the lecture. So, Prof. Iqbal, please, if you're ready, the time and the screen are yours.
Thank you so much, Nidho, for your kind words. Can you please once again tell me the time? Because I have been told that 2 hours, whether it will be 2 hours or 1 hour duration.
It will be around 50 to 60 minutes. And then we will have like 45.
Okay, 50 to 60 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, and 45 minutes of discussion at the end.
Okay. Now I got the point. So probably, okay, because during 50 minutes, it will not be possible to cover these two paradigm. So let me try.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen first. I'll be speaking on the paradigm or model of psychopathology. So in this lecture, first of all, I will explain briefly the meaning of paradigm or model. Then I will discuss about biological paradigm, critical evaluation, psychodynamic paradigm, critical evaluation. But before that, as it usually happens in online lecture, sometimes if a link is broken due to poor internet connectivity, the speaker is not aware. If Valina is here, please, you have my WhatsApp number. Please send me the message in case link is broken. But I am hopeful, inshallah, it will not be broken, but it has happened many times. So, good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum, all of you. I'm Naved Iqbal, as has been introduced by Nido. So, let me share my PPT first. So with time, first let me explain the meaning of paradigm or model. So with time, each of us develop a perspective that help us make sense of the things other people say and do. If you meet all the people, they have their perspective or model of life. So accordingly, they are interpreting events which are occurring around them. In science, the perspectives used to explain events are known as models or paradigms. So we can say it is a theoretical or conceptual framework within which psychologists, scientists, or clinicians work. Each model spells out the scientist's basic assumptions, gives order to the field under study, and sets guidelines for its investigation. So I don't know how many of you are aware, there is a philosopher of science, Kuhan, who has introduced this notion of paradigm. So if we see science or philosophy of science, how science progress, there are different views. View of Popper, view of Kuhn, view of Lakatos, view of Feyerabend. So all of these scientists say how science progress. And interestingly, you will find a lot of difference in their views. So this, again, I repeat, the word paradigm is associated with Kuhn. So he has defined its meaning. So paradigm influences what the investigators observe, as well as the questions they ask, the information they seek, and how they interpret this information. So as I have already mentioned, this notion we have taken from science. First of all, physical sciences were developed after Renaissance in Europe. Then social sciences were developed, and social sciences have taken the same assumption of science which were there to explain physical sciences. So let me give one concrete example of abnormal behavior or psychopathology. Suppose someone has developed depression. So how will psychologists explain it? In psychology, there are different paradigms such as biological paradigm, psychodynamic paradigm, behavioral paradigm, cognitive paradigm, and some people say cognitive behavioral paradigm. They have combined the two, and humanistic and existential paradigm. These are the major paradigm. Question is the same. Why do people develop depression? Those who hold biological paradigm, they assume that malfunctioning of the body or dysfunction in body lead to psychological problem. Those who hold psychodynamic paradigm, they assume unconscious conflict, which are usually associated with early childhood experiences. They are the cause of the problem. Behaviorists assume faulty learning is the cause of problem. Cognitive viewpoint assume that faulty interpretation of the situation is the cause of the problem. Now the question is same. Now in that light, try to say what I'm trying to explain. So paradigm influence what the investigator observe. So those who are holding biological paradigm, they will observe only biological functioning. They will try to find out malfunctioning of the body. Those who hold psychodynamic paradigm, they will try to see only or observe only unconscious conflict. Those who hold behavioral paradigm, they will try to see faulty learning condition. And those who hold cognitive viewpoint, they will try to see faulty interpretation of the situation. Question is the same, but those holding different paradigm, they influence or they observe different things. As well as the question they ask. Again, they will ask the different question. Information they seek. because biological paradigm will seek only malfunctioning of the body, psychodynamic paradigm, unconscious conflict, and how they interpret this information, because the given data may be interpreted differently depending on different paradigm. So now you will find question is the same, but those who hold different paradigm, they observe different thing, ask different question, seek different information, and given information is interpreted differently by them. So first paradigm which I have to discuss is biological paradigm. So as I have already mentioned, biological paradigm assume malfunctioning of the body or disruption in bodily function leads to psychological problem. So this paradigm has used the model of physical illnesses as the basis for understanding abnormal behavior. How abnormal behavior develop? Abnormal behavior develop in the same way in which physical illnesses develop. And the same model, same causes which are used to explain physical illnesses, same can be used to explain abnormal behavior. So for this, I am using this expression. They have used the model of physical illnesses as the basis for understanding abnormal behavior. So it is also known as medical model or disease model. So now you will find in the area of psychopathology or abnormal behavior, one more thing you must keep in mind. In this lecture, I may use some words such as abnormal behavior, psychopathology, mental illnesses, psychological problem, although there is slight difference between mental illness and behavioral problem. But I will be using all these expressions interchangeably. I will be using them in the same expression, in the same meaning. So in the area of abnormal psychology or psychopathology, the terminology of medical sciences is very common, is very prevalent. You will find symptoms, diagnosis, treatment, prognosis. So it illustrates the influence of biological paradigm in the area of abnormal psychology. But what is the problem? As I have already mentioned, this has used, biological paradigm has used the model of physical illnesses as the basis for understanding physical illnesses. But that model in medical sciences has changed from time to time. There was one model, which was the earliest model, germ theory. Germ theory means that microorganisms such as bacteria and viruses can cause problem, psychological problem. It was one of the earliest model. So in the area of psychology, in the beginning, it was also applied. For example, in 1905, general paresis, it was a problem which also has some psychological symptoms, which were caused by untreated syphilis or bacterial infection. So it may lead to psychological problem. So in 1905, that cause of this infection was discovered in one psychological problem. After that, there was an enthusiasm that in one illness, we have identified the problem. Maybe soon in other illnesses, we will also find the cause. I repeat once again, germ theory was very common. 1 minute, only 1 minute. Tanveer, class chal rahi hai. In the beginning, I repeat, germ theory was very common. In the area of abnormal psychology, they have also discovered the cause of one psychological problem, which then known as general paresis, which were caused by the untreated syphilis, and cause of it was bacterial infection. So there was a lot of enthusiasm that time in this field that in one illness, we have discovered the infection. Maybe in other illnesses, we will also discover infection. But later on, physicians in medical sciences themselves realize that not all physical illnesses are caused by infection. For example, major illnesses such as diabetes, heart disease, blood pressure, they were not caused by infection. So infection as a cause for psychological problem were not discussed for more than 40 years. But again, there is some beginning. As we will discuss, I will show the studies. So currently, I repeat once again, because model of physical illnesses have changed from time to time. So accordingly, they have applied it in the area of abnormal psychology. So currently, in the area of abnormal psychology, They are trying to focus on chemical imbalance, brain abnormality, genetic malfunctioning, infection, and this one recent cause, dysregulation of enteric nervous system. So first is neurotransmitter imbalance. So if we want to understand neurotransmitter imbalance, first of all, we need to understand the functioning of the neurons. So neurons is the smallest unit of our nervous system. Neuron has three structures, which you can see in this: dendrites, axon, and cell body. The function of the dendrites is to receive stimulation. Through axon, it reaches to last part. Then finally, dendrites of next neuron receive it. So axon, cell body, dendrites, axon, and cell body. We can say these are the three parts. So human brain or nervous system consists of more than 100 billion nerve cells or neurons and thousands of billions of support cells. These support cells are called glia cells. So where these neurotransmitters are found? At the end of the axon. One more thing you must keep in mind. Although brain composed of more than 100 billion of nerve cells of neurons, in majority of cases, information can to another. I repeat, in majority of cases, information cannot pass directly from one neuron to another neuron. At the end of axon, there are some chemicals are stored. So when nerve impulses reaches at the end of the axon, it causes these neurotransmitter to be released. As a result, a kind of functional bridge is formed and information is passed from one neuron to another neuron. So how neurotransmitter play a role? As I have already mentioned, in the end of axon, there are some neurotransmitter. These nerve impulses, when it reaches there, it causes these neurotransmitter to be released. A kind of functional bridge is formed and information is passed from one neuron to another neuron. Generally or broadly, we can say these neurotransmitters have two broad functions. One is known as excitatory function and second is known as inhibitory function. Collectively, we can say, although each neurotransmitter has some specific role to play. Excitatory function means, let me show the last slide. When information reaches there at postsynaptic dendrites, it increases the tendency of these receptors to receive the information. It is known as excitatory function. Inhibitory function means postsynaptic dendrites receptor, they will block the information flow. So it will prevent the flow of the information. Now in different illnesses, imbalance of different neurotransmitters have been identified. Traditionally, in schizophrenia, imbalance or excess dopamine was identified. It was traditional, but according to new studies, it is not so simple. Because they assume now, they assume abnormal activity or interactions, both dopamine and serotonin, and perhaps other neurotransmitter, including glutamatic and GABA, rather than to abnormal dopamine activity alone is the cause of schizophrenia. So what I'm trying to convey, with time, researchers have identified some other neurotransmitters. So traditionally, in most of the books, you will find it is only the excess of dopamine. But new studies are suggesting, in addition to dopamine, there is some interaction or roles of some other neurotransmitter also, including serotonin and glutamatic and GABA, not just the abnormal activity of dopamine alone. Same applies to mania. Mania, it is where we can see in bipolar disorder. At the one end, it is depression. At another end, it is mania, extreme happiness or euphoria. So traditionally, there was a role of norepinephrine and serotonin. And now researchers are also suggesting the role of GABA. Otherwise, GABA traditionally was implicated in anxiety disorders. In depression, serotonin and norepinephrine. In OCD, serotonin. In anxiety, GABA. Norepinephrine, anxiety, and other stress-related disorders, they have been identified. So early theory were very simplistic, which were proposing either too much or too more neurotransmitter is the cause of the problem. Now new researches are also suggesting the ways. How does it take place? And moreover, they are suggesting it is very complicated process. And sometimes there is a role of one more neurotransmitter, and some neurotransmitter also act as a neuromodulator. Neuromodulator means it, decide the activity of some other neurotransmitter. It just, uh, keep in check on the quantity or activity of some other neurotransmitter. Also it balance some other neurotransmitter also. It is known as neuromodulator. It modulates their activities. So now the details also, because I have been told I have only 50 minutes. From 2 hours I had, keeping in mind 2 hours I have prepared this lecture, so I'll be very fast. So these are some of the steps. So I would like to skip it. Why I would like to skip it? Otherwise, I will not be able to complete my lecture. So those who are interested, I'll share my PPT with you. So they have given the steps how this process occurs and where does exactly this malfunctioning occurs. So these are some of the steps. So I am omitting it. I am skipping it. So now there is a imbalance of other chemical also, which is known as hormone. Hormone is a chemical secreted by the endocrine glands. So there are some glands in the body which are known as endocrine gland or ductless gland. Why they are called ductless gland? Because they pump its secretion directly into the blood. Although hormone word is used collectively for all the chemicals released by different endocrine glands, such as pituitary gland, thyroid gland, pancreas, adrenal, and so on. Collectively, we use the word hormone, especially in depression in the beginning and now in depression or anxiety also. Over excess of hypothalamic, pituitary, and adrenal cortex gland has been identified. Because remember, activities of all endocrine gland are controlled by hypothalamus. And pituitary gland is considered master gland. It controls the quantity or activities of other glands. So therefore, I am using the axis hypothalamus. Hypothalamus control the activity of pituitary, and pituitary in turn control the activity of other glands. So I am using the axis hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal gland. Adrenal gland has two parts. One is known as adrenal medulla, and second is known as adrenal cortex. Adrenal cortex is the outer part of adrenal gland. So there is a over secretion of this gland. How we have come to know? Because this adrenal cortex secrete cortisol. The name of the hormone of this gland, especially adrenal cortex, is cortisol. So those who suffer from depression, high level of cortisol has been found in them. So it shows that there was a overactivation of this axis. So in the beginning, it was identified in depression, and now new researchers are also suggesting that even in anxiety, there is a overactivation of this axis. So next, brain abnormality. It is the next cause, because researchers have realized that if there is abnormality in some brain structure, then it is associated with some psychological problem. So within the brain, large groups of neurons. In the beginning, we have seen neurons. So large group of neurons form distinct areas or brain regions. For example, there is one structure, basal ganglia. Basal ganglia is usually play a role in planning and producing movement. So it is linked to one psychological problem, which is known as Huntington disease. So Huntington disease is a disorder marked by violent emotional outbursts, memory loss, suicidal thinking, involuntary body movements, and absurd beliefs. This disease has been traced to a loss of cells in the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia consists of 5 pairs of nuclei: caudate nucleus, putamen, globus pallidus, subthalamic nucleus, and substantia nigra. These nuclei are grouped into broader cluster, stratum, which further consists of the dorsal stratum, made by the caudate nucleus and putamen. So this is the structure of this brain area. You can see. So there is one more brain structure known as amygdala. Amygdala is the area which control attention to emotionally salient stimuli and memory for emotionally relevant information. So those who develop depression, they show more activity in the amygdala when watching pictures of emotional faces than do people without depression. So what usually do some researcher, when they try to find out the abnormal activity in some area, what they do, they take one group of depressed patient, because this is the question of depression, and one group of healthy or normal subjects. Then they say which area of the brain is more active. So they have found when watching pictures of emotional faces, so people who suffer from depression, they show more activity in amygdala than normal people. The size of hippocampus is reduced among some patients who have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and schizophrenia. It is perhaps due to overactivity of their stress response system. So this is the brain structure, amygdala and hippocampus. You see the photo, you can see the photograph of this. Now, genetic factors. One more thing you must keep in mind. In the beginning, when genetic factors were proposed, maybe 40 years back, 50 years back, they were suggesting either genetic factor result in problem or environmental influences shape that particular behavior, whether it is abnormal behavior or normal behavior. But according to most of the researcher thinking, genetic factor does not result directly into any trait, whether it is abnormal behavior or something other. At the most, they can give us only predisposition or tendency toward developing some illness. I repeat once again, now according to majority thinking, they cannot result directly in any trait of behavior or psychological problem. At the most, they can give us tendency, predisposition for developing some illness. So now most of the researchers believe almost all behavior is heritable to some degree. It means they involve in genes. Despite this, genes do not operate in isolation from the environment. Instead, throughout the lifespan, the environment shapes how our genes are expressed, and our genes also shape our environment, according to Pullman. Now, to illustrate that both influence each other, there are a number of views in psychology. One of the view, which is recent, is known as cultural neuroscience. Cultural neuroscience was developed in 2007 by Xiao and Mbedi, two researchers. According to them, culture and genetic predisposition influence each other. For example, if we are believing in some cultural belief, it is not necessary it is because of the cultural influence. Sometimes it is possible it is because of the genetic predisposition, because genetically we have been predisposed to believe in such type of cultural belief. In the same way, if some genes are expressed, especially the functioning of the nervous system, it is not necessary it is because of genetic expression. Culture also shaped the way in which nervous system operate, including the genes expression. So this dual view that both genetic expression and culture influence each other, it is known as cultural neuroscience. I repeat, in 2007 it was proposed. It is also the hot area. Some other view also, some say nature via nurture. So if we are believing in that it is genetic expression, again it will be operated through environment. So Ridley has expressed this view. So it is ovum, sperm, zygote. I think most of you are aware. So each cell in the human brain and body, with the exception of red blood cells, which do not contain any genes, and female egg cells and male sperm cells, each of which contain only one copy of the human genome, contains 23 pairs of chromosomes, with each chromosome in a pair inherited from one of the person's parents. So it means we have two complete sets of human genome, and we have a number of copies, trillions of copies in our body. So every chromosome contains numerous genes, segments that control the characteristics and traits of a person inherits, and genes are made up of DNA. So again, 22 pairs, first 22 pairs are known as autosomes. It determine our personality characteristics. And last pair, which is depicted as XY, it is known as sex chromosome. It determines our sexual characteristics. Simple fruit fly contains 14,000 genes. Now the question arises, how many genes human body have? There are different estimates. According to some it is 30,000, around 30,000. According to another, especially Genome Project, between 20,000 to 25,000. So before Genome Project, which have counted the genes, it was assumed that human body had more like 1 lakh genes. But now it has been found we have much less genes. So it is not the number of genes which matter. Rather, it is the sequencing of the genes. So I repeat, number of genes not important because we are very complex human being. It is here not the number of genes which is important, rather sequencing or ordering and expression of the genes which have made us very complex. Now you can see the photograph of chromosome and genes, different photographs. Now genetic structure of DNA, simple sugar, phosphate and 4 nitrogenous bases, ATGC you will find. Again, I am skipping. All these biological processes I am skipping because of the constraint of time. So genes are responsible for making proteins that in turn make the body and brain work. Some of these proteins turn on and off other genes, a process called gene expression. So in most mental disorders, it is not the single gene which is operating, rather many genes contribute vulnerability. So psychologists or researchers have used the word polygenic. So psychopathology is polygenic. It means several genes perhaps operating at different times during the course of development will be the essence of vulnerability, not the single gene. Remember this thing. So as far as genetic factor is concerned, there are 2 broad approaches to explain how genes operate. One is known as behavior genetics, which is old approach. And second is known as molecular genetic approach. Behavior genetic approach is study of the degree to which genes and environmental factors influence behaviors. So many behavior genetic studies estimate the heritability of a mental illness without providing any information about how the genes might work. They simply tell us that such and such percent role is played by the genes or genetic factor, such and such role is played by the environmental influences. But they do not specify the functioning or malfunctioning of the genes. So heritability refers to the extent to which vulnerability in a particular behavior or disorder in a population can be accounted for by genetic factors. Now environment. Now, in the beginning, researchers thought that environment influences us uniformly in the same way. But now some researchers are saying that in the context of the same family, environment may be shared and non-shared. Shared means salary income of the family, parenting style, and so on. Non-shared means in some family, sometimes parents react to them differently. Different family members have different friends. They watch different movies, they read different types of novels. So it is known as non-shared. So even environment can be shared and non-shared. Now you will find it is the dominant model in modern science, including psychology, that whatever we are, whether it is our normal trait or it is our abnormal behavior, either it is shared or determined by the environment or by the genetic factors. So I repeat once again, it is the model in mainstream science, including mainstream psychology, either genetic factor influences or environment. We are the product of this, whether it is our normal behavior or abnormal vulnerability or abnormal behavior. I disagree with this approach. No doubt, most of the things they explain, but still there is some gap in some cases. I repeat once again, most often this approach is applicable. It is explaining most of the cases. But sometimes we find some example which cannot be explained by this dominant model. So let me give you one concrete example. There is one phrase, Siamese twins. Siam was the old name of Thailand. There were two conjoined twins. Conjoined means who were joined together. They were conjoined twins. Their name was Eng and Cheng. So those who are aware of genetic factors, they know that there are two types of twins, identical twins or fraternal twins. Identical twins are also known as monozygotic twins because they develop from the same genes, same egg. So therefore, they share 100% of the genes. So Siamese twins, uh, Siam, I repeat once again, Siam was the old name of Thailand. There were twins there. Their name was Eng and Cheng. They were conjoined. Conjoined means those who were joined together. Because they were identical twins, it means they shared 100% of genes. And they were living presumably in the same environment. So according to this model, gene environment, their behavior would have been the same. But interestingly or surprisingly, their behavior was different. One was happy-go-lucky and second was moody or depressed. So one was happy-go-lucky and second was moody and depressed. So it means that there is some other factor also. I know many people from the one family they are coming, they have become alcoholic. They were asked why they have become alcoholic. They told that my father used to consume alcohol. After seeing him, I have become alcoholic. From the same family, other person is coming who has started hating alcohol. Why that person has started hating alcohol? Because he said after consuming alcohol, my father used to make a lot of disturbance in the family. So therefore, I have started hating the alcohol. Now you will find from the same family, one person has become alcoholic, other has not become. So what is missing in this model? Our free will, the direction of our lives. We are capable of choosing direction of our lives. Humanistic psychologists, existential psychologists talk about this. So this free will, we are capable of choosing the direction. Environment cannot affect me mechanically. I want to take the influence. I know what type of person I have to become. So this thing is still missing in this model. So in behavior genetic approach, they use two expression. One is known as genotype and second is known as phenotype. Genotype means the total genetic makeup of an individual, which consists of inherited genes, physical sequences of DNA, we can say, and the genotype cannot be observed outwardly. So phenotype, the totality of observable behavior, which consists of the phenotype is the totality of observable behavior, characteristics such as level of anxiety. If someone has developed anxiety or depression, it will be known as phenotype. So phenotype is the totality of observable behavioral characteristics. The phenotype changes over time and is the product of an interaction between the genotype and the environment. And again, there are different view, her environment and view. One view was explained by Turkheimer, different interaction, how they look. Genes environment exert influence via brain. Reciprocal gene environment interaction, I have discussed under cultural neuroscience. So sometimes, according to some studies, it is interesting to note, sometimes people seem to select environments that increase the likelihood of certain kinds of stressful life events, at least in part based on their genes. Because if we say that someone is having disturbed relationship, so according to this view, some people, because of the genetic predisposition, they seek the relationship with difficult type of person, and naturally when they are having relationship with difficult person, it will be disturbed. So again, so if someone is having disturbed relationships, sometimes it is because of the predisposition of genes. So Sometimes my PPT is not moving. I don't know what is the reason. It is hung. It is not moving. So let me. Yes, it is hung.
Yeah, it's not moving.
It is not working. So anyway, I'm also trying to exit. It is not being exited. So I can continue without it. Later on, I will share my PPT. Although sometimes what happens, because I am coming from different culture, my accent is different. So usually I use PPT because some of my accent, some student might not be able to understand. Otherwise, I can continue with it. So it was about genetic. And so this approach, behavior genetics, simply tell us whether any behavior is caused by the genetic influences or environmental influences. They do not tell us where exactly that malfunctioning is taking place. There are three different methods which are used when we are using behavior genetics: family study method, twin study method, and the study of the adopted children. Family study method means they see the prevalence of any illness in the family member and they compare it with general population. If incidence or prevalence of any illness is higher among family members, it means it is because of the genetic influence. And one more thing, so when they also use one approach, first degree relative and second degree relative. First degree relatives means those family members or relatives which share 50% of the genes. So from parents to offspring, 50% genes. Siblings also have 50% genes. Nieces, nephews, they share 25% of genes. So they are known as second degree relatives. So family study methods simply see the prevalence of any illness in close family members, then they compare it with general population. If any illness is caused by genetic factors, then its prevalence should be higher in close family member compared to general population. But remember, this method do not eliminate the possibility of environmental influences. I often give example of that. My wife is afraid of lizard. You understand lizard? One lizard which which live on the wall. Lizard, understand all of you?
Yes.
So my wife and daughter are afraid of lizard. So whether it is genetic that my daughter has inherited, not necessarily, because my daughter right from the beginning, she has seen her mother reacting after seeing the lizard. So we cannot rule out the possibility of environmental influences if we are using family study method. Second method is known as twin study method. Twin, pair, and there are two types of twins: identical twins and fraternal twins. So identical twins are known as, we simply can say, they are known as monozygotic twins. In short, MZ. Why monozygotic? Because they develop from the same egg. Second is known as fraternal twins or dizygotic. Dizygotic means who develop from two or more different eggs. So what is the genetic difference between the two? Identical twins share 100% of the genes, and fraternal twins share only 50% of the genes, just like the sibling. So whenever this approach is used, we see the prevalence among twins. So according to this model, if any illness is caused by genetic factors, then its prevalence must be higher among identical twins. Why among identical twins? Because they share 100% of the genes. So most of the studies are showing that prevalence of any illness is higher among identical twins. So we can say that probably genetic factors are playing a role. But again, word of caution. Again, by using this method, we cannot completely rule out the influence of the environment. I don't know how many of you have seen. Usually, identical twins are reared in the more similar fashion. If they are identical, sometimes parents also take pride that others cannot differentiate between the two. They wear same kind of clothes, they receive same kind of treatment. Sometimes examination is of one person, other person can sit in the examination, and so many other things we hear. So again, we cannot rule out the influence of environment. Now, third method, which can separate the influence of environment, is known as study of the adoptee or study of adopted children. You might have seen there are some unfortunate who develop schizophrenia. So during the course of developing schizophrenia, they have given birth to their children. So naturally, these mothers were not able to look after their children. These children were adopted by some normal families and they were reared in different environments. So what is the assumption here? If any illness is caused by genetic factors, then its incidence should be higher uh, uh, in the families in which they are reared, regardless of the family in which they are reared. And if it is caused by the environment, then the children of a schizophrenic mother should remain normal when they are being reared in normal families or in normal environment. Some studies are showing mixed result. No doubt, after being reared in normal families, sometimes its prevalence was less, but despite that, they have developed some problem. So it shows that there is a genetic vulnerability. In schizophrenia, in bipolar disorder, there is a strong genetic vulnerability. Now, second approach, which is known as molecular genetic studies, they try to point out the role of particular malfunctioning of the genes, that due to this malfunctioning, this problem is occurring. And they are identifying the name of the gene also, and they have located the genes also, that this gene is located on chromosome 15, 10, 20, and so on. So what they try to find out, that this illness, there is a malfunctioning of this particular gene. This gene is located on such and such chromosomes. So sometimes pair 2, 8, 10, 12, something like that you will find that because of this malfunctioning, this problem is occurring. So it is known as molecular genetic studies. So they are trying to point out the role of particular malfunctioning. But again, there is a word of caution. In the beginning, there was a lot of enthusiasm, but especially in bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, now they are pointing out, they have found the role of many genes or malfunctioning of many genes. So it means it is not so simple. It is very complex process. Now, next very important is starting from 1990s. Now, again, some studies are showing that probably there is a role of some genetic, infection. Now, they are trying to find out the role of infection. How they are trying to find out, because in between, I am trying to see whether this PPT has started working or not. Still, it is not working. So they have found that those who have developed schizophrenia, when they were during pregnancy, their mothers have developed some illnesses, infectious illnesses such as influenza or some other illnesses compared to the normal mothers. So what is the assumption here? We can say it is a kind of circumstantial evidence, no direct evidence, but there is indirect evidence. So they assume that the virus may contract the developing fetus when still it is in the mother's womb. They can enter the brain and can remain dormant there. So during puberty, after the secretion of some hormone or some other infection, it can be activated and it can lead to psychological problem. So there is some indirect evidence which are pointing out the role of infection. Now, next important, it is known as the role of microbiome. Microbiome or dysregulation of enteric nervous system. Enteric nervous system, we can say it is a gastrointestinal tract. So that gastrointestinal tract, there is some, bacteria or some other microorganism. So if they are dislocated, then it can be associated with psychological problem. I have not found this explanation in any of the textbook, but many research articles in the last 5 years, they have focused more on this. I repeat once again, I have not found this explanation in any of the textbook till date. Rather, this explanation in the last 5 years, I have found in research article. In the beginning, they have pointed out the role in anxiety and depression. Now, in other illnesses also, they are pointing out. So sometimes this is used as gut-brain axis, other time gastrointestinal tract. So this tract, if it is, and it is also known as enteric nervous system. So if this is dysregulated, then again, it can result in psychological problem. Now, the very briefly evaluation of this approach. This is one of the dominant approach. Biological approach is one of the dominant approach in psychology these days. It is fashionable also. It is explaining many things, and it is also useful in treatment. But what is the limitation of this? Our mental life, our behavior is composed of both biological and non-biological processes. On the basis of biological processes alone, we cannot explain all behavior, because researchers have expressed the doubt. Suppose if we want to explain the delusion, if someone has developed delusion, just 1 minute. So I have received the message from Melina. My screen is not working, but it is hung now. I'm not able to move. So let me try to share it again.
Yes,
Let me
please.
stop sharing. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Professor Naved Iqbal.
Oh, no problem, because it will be useful. So now it is good. Let me try to share again.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof.
Is it visible?
Yes, it is.
My screen is
Yes.
visible?
Yeah.
Yes.
So now you will find some of the new studies which are finding out the role of infection. So Liu et al. 2014, Arias 2012, schizophrenia, exposure to certain viruses during childhood or before birth. As I have already mentioned, mothers contracted influenza or related viruses during pregnancy. Anxiety, mood disorders, psychotic disorders now are also being implicated. In the beginning, it was schizophrenia. Now it was the dysregulation of enteric nervous system. I was talking about microbiome. So the microbiome as a novel paradigm in studying stress and mental health. It was one article written by Liu in 2017. Now it is the meaning of microbiome and so many other things. And research findings are suggesting this thing. I'll share my PPT. So it is another article written by Butler et al. In 2019. Men and the Microbiome, a New Theory of Everything. And it was published in Annual Review of Clinical Psychology. So now they are finding its role in different illnesses. So this thing I wanted to share. So now the evaluation, I was discussing this second. Third limitation is reductionism. Reductionism means, and remember also, this is not the limitation of biological paradigm alone. Rather, it is the limitation of biology also. So what they assume, it is based on one view, it is known as reductionism. What is the reductionism? That if we understand the functioning of the smallest unit, then we can understand whole functioning. So therefore, you might have seen there was a focus on understanding smallest unit. What is the smallest unit? Nerve cell or neuron, dendrite, cell body, axon. But what is the problem here? Because biology and biological psychology fail to explain integrative processes. After this smallest unit, after that, neural pathways are formed. So how these different activities are integrated? Biology and biological psychology do not explain it. So therefore, it is the limitation. Yes, we have understood smallest unit. This understanding is important, but it fails to explain integrative processes. Last limitation, side effects of medication. There are so many side effects. So I don't know whether I have time or not. Should I also discuss about this psychodynamic paradigm or not?
Yes, if you will, we can have like still like 25 minutes more.
Okay, so let me share. So again, I will be very fast. I repeat once again, I have prepared this lecture keeping in view 2 hour duration. So because in the beginning, I don't know, I have received this message that your lecture will be of 2 hour duration. So accordingly, I have prepared. Otherwise, I would have focused only on one lecture in detail. So many things I have skipped, many details I have skipped. Here also I will skip many details, but let me very fast. According to latest view of Sigmund Freud, unconscious conflict is the cause of psychological problem, and these conflicts are usually related to early childhood experiences. But there are some psychologists, researchers who see the antecedents or beginning of this paradigm, how this paradigm started before Sigmund Freud, or what factors influencing. So most often they start with Nancy School. Nancy is a town in France where two physicians, Libo and Burnham, worked. And that time, one illness was very common. It was hysteria. Now we don't have illness with this name. Its symptoms majorly has been covered under conversion disorders. And now in DSM-5, it is known as functional neurological disorders. So they have one more thing you must keep in mind. It was the time when neither hysteria, causes of hysteria was known, nor the process of hypnosis, because hypnosis was considered very mysterious process. So during that period of time, around 1950s, 60s, they have expressed the view that both hysteria and hypnosis were related, and they were caused by suggestions. So after that, Charcot has learned hypnosis from Nancy School, and they have promoted this view. I am also skipping the debate. Sigmund Freud has learned hypnosis from Charcot. So therefore, Charcot name is important. In the beginning, Freud has worked with Joseph Brewer. And in 1896, they have published one study named Studies in Hysteria. So where they have given the earliest cause of the psychological problem or of hysteria during that period of time. It is known as seduction theory. Seduction theory assumes that child abuse or incest is the cause of psychological problem. So this theory is known as seduction theory. In the beginning, Sigmund Freud has proposed that theory. Later on, he has disapproved this theory. And in its place, he has proposed the theory of unconscious conflict. But starting with 1980s and 1990s, when especially in dissociative disorder, dissociative amnesia, dissociative identity disorder, causes of sexual abuse were discovered. So researchers have started asking questions whether Sigmund Freud was genuinely concerned that sexual abuse or incest was not the cause of problem, or because of the society's disapproval, he has changed his theory. Now there was debate, so I'm not going into it. Let me discuss his modified theory. So according to Freud's modified theory, unconscious conflict, which are usually associated with early childhood experience, is the cause of psychological problem. How therapists treat the problem? They bring this unconscious conflict to conscious level and try to resolve it in the light of adult reality. Why in the light of adult reality? Because conflict is related to early childhood experiences, and now person has become adult. So in the light of adult reality, this conflict is usually resolved. So many things I am skipping. So now you will find in Sigmund Freud theory, in explanation, there are some theory which we need to understand in order to understand his explanation. Why do people have unconscious conflict? What is the meaning of unconscious? So he has given the concept of mind, and in concept of mind, he has given three different types of mind: conscious, preconscious or subconscious, or unconscious. So I think you are the student of psychology, most of you are familiar with this. So again, I'm skipping. Now he has also given the structure or level of personality, id, ego, and superego. Although I'm aware, I know that you must be aware, but still briefly I will discuss that. According to Freud, when a child is born, his personality is mainly composed of id, and it operates according to pleasure principle. Second part of the personality develops as we grow older, and it is known as ego. It develops out of it. It deals with the reality because some of the desire of the id clash with the society's role or rule. So ego allows expression of the id impulses if it fulfills the reality needs. So if it clashes with the reality does not allow, it will put the restriction. As we grow older, then another part of the personality, superego, develop according to Freud. Superego operate according to moral principle. So according to Freud, on the id desire, there is a restriction from two sides. One from ego based on reality principle, and second from superego based on moral principle. So even if reality allows that need, superego put the restriction if it is immoral or if it is wrong. One more thing you must keep in mind, id, ego, superego, these are the metaphors for specific functions or energies. It is not there that we find such type of structure. So it, what is the problem with it? It cannot undertake realistic actions needed to meet its desires. At the most, it can generate the desire or fantasies. So it is known as the primary process thinking. The realistic action needed to meet the its desire is taken by the ego, which is known as secondary process thinking. By planning and decision making is known as the secondary process thinking. The ego drives all its energy from the id. The interplay or interaction of these forces, id, ego, and superego, is referred to as the psychodynamics of the personality. One more thing you must keep in mind, its instincts as well as many of the superego's activities are not known to the conscious mind. Rather, they are unconscious. Although I know you are aware, but still let me briefly define the meaning from which I am explaining this. Unconscious is that part of the mind about which neither we are consciously aware, nor we can become aware with our effort. Yes, there are some occasions where we find that their impulses are expressed, such as slip of pen, slip of tongue, and according to Freud, dreams in disguised form. Although in psychology, there are many theories of dreams. So one of the theory was proposed by Sigmund Freud. So that we can be at same par. In this meaning, I am using this unconscious mind. So now again, stages of psychosexual development is very important in Sigmund Freud's theory. According to Sigmund Freud, personality development takes place in different stages, such as oral, anal, phallic, and latency and genital. Latency is not so much important because that time person is preoccupied in developing social skills. So again, during each stage, different part of the body is the most sensitive to sexual excitation, or therefore the most capable of providing libidinal satisfaction to the id. The anal stage from 18 to 3 years, these are the characteristics. I am skipping all this detail. What is more interesting or important from this perspective, what we call to understand psychopathology, it is the concept of fixation. According to Sigmund Freud, during each stage, the child has some needs which must be fulfilled. If that need is either overfulfilled or underfulfilled, then fixation will take place. Fixation means despite moving physiologically to next stage, psychologically person is still attached to the old stage, and fixation of different stages is linked to some psychological problem. Fixation of oral stage is linked to depression. After it is a very complicated process. First person is fixated at oral stage, then become dependent on other excessively. If person is died or there is a loss, then he has given the explanation, very complex explanation, anger turned inward. But basically it starts with the fixation at oral stage. So fixation at oral stage is associated with depression according to Freud. Fixation during anal stage is linked to OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Fixation at phallic stage is associated with phobia and sexual difficulties, including homosexuality. I don't know, because you are from different culture, I am from India. Whenever we explain Sigmund Freud theory, in his theory, I hope you are all aware, this sexual term is very common. So therefore, I am discussing all these things. So again, that problem, it is hung. So let me stop sharing. Again, I will share. Again, it is not moving. So no problem. So according to this theory of Sigmund Freud, unconscious conflict which are related to early childhood experiences are cause of the problem, and it is the process through which information reaches there. Sigmund Freud has also talked about ego defense mechanism and concept of anxiety. These are some of his most important concepts. According to Freud, there are three types of anxiety. One is known as objective anxiety or realistic anxiety. Second is known as moral anxiety. And third is known as neurotic anxiety. According to Freud, objective or realistic anxiety is stem or result from external threat and danger. If there is some danger or threat in the external world, it can lead to objective anxiety or realistic anxiety. Moral anxiety results from what we call real or contemplated action, which clash with our superego. I repeat once again, if there are some real or contemplated, we have simply thought, real or contemplated action which clash with our superego, it arouses guilt feeling. So that action which arouses guilt feeling is known as moral anxiety. Third type of anxiety is known as neurotic anxiety. Neurotic anxiety means when impulses are struggling for the expression in behavior, and ego putting restriction to it, fearing punishment or negative consequences. So it creates anxiety. It is known as neurotic anxiety. Now recall your experiences. Sometimes we are anxious without knowing why. In some cases, we are clear what is the cause of our anxiety. In other cases, we are not sure what is the cause of our problem. So it is likely that such type of anxiety is neurotic anxiety. I am not saying 100%. Because most of the psychoanalytic terms are hypothetical. Neither we can prove it nor we can disprove it scientifically. Please remember this thing whenever we discuss about Sigmund Freud. So objective anxiety can be dealt with taking some action, realistic action. Suppose if my relationship is disturbed with my close friend, it is creating anxiety in me, then I can resolve. Is there some external threat? I can remove it. So objective anxiety or realistic anxiety can be dealt with by taking realistic action. On the other hand, if there is some neurotic anxiety and anxiety is continuously coming. One more thing, according to Freud, anxiety is very unpleasant experience, painful experience. So no one wants to be anxious. So we use some devices, unconscious ways, through which we distort the reality. So it is known as unconscious, it is known as ego defense mechanism. Although most often, according to Freud, ego function at conscious level. But there are some function, some roles, some activities which ego perform unconsciously. And ego defense mechanism is one of them. So repression, suppression, displacement, and so many other. And in some particular psychological problem, there is a operation of some particular defense mechanism. For example, there is a fixation at oral stage and anal stage, and there will be operation of some ego defense mechanism. So if there is a fixation at anal stage, after reaction formation, so reaction formation is one defense mechanism which operate in OCD. In the same way, there is a one defense mechanism, projection, which operates in delusional disorders. So Sigmund Freud, I'm ending it here. Sigmund Freud have used some technique to uncover unconscious mind. So he has used free association, dream analysis, analysis of the transference. Yes, in the beginning, he has used hypnosis. In around 1900, he has abandoned the use of hypnosis by saying that through it, we cannot hypnotize all the people. So in its place, he has developed the technique free association. So I am fully aware I have exceeded time, so I am stopping here. So if you want me to continue, I can explain. If you want me to stop and take the question, the choice is yours. Please suggest me how I have to do.
Yeah, I think we will go to the Q&A session for now, and maybe if we still have some more time.
And sorry, well, in the 1 minute, sorry, because I have prepared the lecture keeping in view to our duration, and I have not done justice to the topic because I have skipped many details. If I was aware that duration is only 50 minutes, I would have discussed only one topic, either psychodynamic or biological. So I'm fully aware. I'm not satisfied. I have not done justice to the topic. So many things I have skipped. Many details.
I'm sorry for that for the time constriction as well. So because I think it is an almost impossible topic to just cram in just like 60 minutes because it's a lot of interesting stuff that you have mentioned earlier. So, but nevertheless, now we are getting to the Q&A session. Thank you for Prof. Iqbal for such a insightful talk. And please, participant, if you have any questions, now is your time to feel free to drop any questions in the chat box, or even better, you can also use the raise hand feature to ask your question directly. And maybe while waiting for the participant, for an opener, I will ask a question myself, if you would, if you don't mind, sir.
Sure.
Yeah. So maybe you haven't got into this topic, but as far as I know, Freud's teaching in psychology has been under criticism for a long time now, due to its almost impossible falsifiability. It's almost impossible to prove that it is false. Yeah. So therefore, it has been under criticism for a long time, and now psychodynamic is not as popular anymore as it is in the past. So I would like to ask about your opinion. Do you think that psychodynamic paradigm is still relevant for modern psychology and our and clinical practice that we have today? And if it is the case, then how so? How relevant it is?
If I have understood your question correctly, first thing you have said that it is impossible to prove all the biological processes. Second, you have said that in the past psychodynamic was very popular or influential. Now it is no longer. Whether it is still relevant or not, you are asking my opinion. Am I correct?
Yes. But okay. The first thing that I said that is about Freud's theory that it is almost impossible to prove wrong or prove right. So therefore, people are criticizing it. And what do you think about this?
First thing, these days, cognitive viewpoint, cognitive behavioral and biological viewpoint is very dominant. But remember, some other viewpoint are also emerging. And sometimes for the same behavior, you have different explanation. Sometimes it is your choice. For a long time, I was thinking that psychodynamic is not so relevant as why we are giving so much importance to it. But as I am trying to adopt different perspective, first thing you must keep in mind, I am fully aware in present time, biological viewpoint and cognitive viewpoint, cognitive behavioral are dominant. But still I have found, despite that, this viewpoint, I mean to say other viewpoint are also relevant. Especially in some cases, still I have found psychodynamic viewpoint relevant. Only 1 minute, one important point. Samina? Walaikum. गलती से मैंने कर दिया अब तो आप कोई दूसरा कर दीजिए अभी मेरा लेक्चर चल रहा है तो मैं हो सकता है कंफ्यूजन में कर दिया अच्छा मैंने कहा पहले वो अटेम्प्ट तो करें पहले क्वेश्चन हां पहले कर लीजिए अभी मैं बताता sorry for interruption because of one important point but remember despite this there are some newer viewpoint not in all in some cases psychodynamic I still personally find relevant I have discovered in the past 2 3 or 4 years only. Earlier, I was not like that. One more thing you must keep in mind. Most of the concept of psychodynamic or psychoanalysis were developed while treating hysteria. Now we don't have hysteria, this illness, in conversion disorder, dissociative. And still for explaining the same illness, still we find some of the psychodynamic concept relevant. Yes, for depression, anxiety, you will not find this illness so relevant, or schizophrenia. But in the case of conversion disorder or some dissociative, we find the relevance of this disorder. But remember also, what I'm trying to see, I am trying to see the limitation of all these models, because I have been also working in the area of Islamic psychology. All these models depict the model of man, what we are and how we are functioning. And again, in all these models, you will not find any mention of some other non-material reality, because we are the part of material as well as non-material reality. You will not find any mention in Sigmund Freud theory or mainstream psychology. So you will find the concept of spirituality is also becoming very popular. And I also disagree with Sigmund Freud. I criticize Sigmund Freud because he has depicted the role of religion very negatively. Now, why he has depicted the role of religion very negatively, there are interesting explanations. Because according to some researches, in his personal life, he was very religious. But he has expressed very negative view of religion, because of which most of the people in Western world has become atheist. I don't know how many of you have heard the name of Thomas Sess. Sess names S-Z-A-S-Z. Thomas Sess is a famous, he was a famous mental health professional. He has given interesting explanation. Sigmund Freud was Jew, and Western world, most of the world is Christian. Thomas Sess has said that Sigmund Freud has deliberately presented negative view of religion. Why he has presented? Because he wanted to take revenge from Christianity because of its traditional anti-Jewish view. Because Christian have tortured Jews, so he has taken revenge by projecting negative view of religion. After that, most of the Western world has become atheist. No doubt, Sigmund Freud was not alone. There are three architects of modern materialist thought. One is Sigmund Freud, second is Karl Marx, and third is Darwin. Yes, some view of Sigmund Freud, I find it is relevant. Other views not relevant, and other views I criticize highly. Same applies to other viewpoint. You might have seen, I have identified one limitation of mainstream science and psychology. They say either only genetic predisposition or environmental influence. But I am capable of choosing the direction of my life. Same environment. People of different, so-called moralistic attitude, they are coming. So they are undermining it. So why they are undermining their explanation? So I repeat once again, no doubt I am fully aware these days psychodynamic viewpoint is not being given so much, respect or attention. But still some of their views are relevant. Others are not relevant. And still some view highly objectionable, especially Oedipus complex. I find it highly objectionable. So neither I am worshipper of Sigmund Freud, nor I am his hardcore critic. According to some, Sigmund Freud is the only person who has contributed maximum to mainstream psychology, to the development of mainstream psychology. How? Because of his own theory. Second, because of his followers. And third, because of his critics. Because his critics tried to disprove that Freud was wrong. So I repeat once again, some concept relevant, others not relevant, and still others highly objectionable. And same applies to other viewpoints. So unless we incorporate some other factor, including spiritual factor, we cannot understand reality completely. So therefore, you will find other views also coming. And I have written in one of my papers, Islamic Perspective to Psychology, the limitation of all this, briefly. So I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, you have. Yeah, very wonderfully. Yeah, thank you for your answer. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, to critically think about a theory, but also not just throw it away wholly, but still learning some aspect that is still relevant for today's practice or modern psychology. And I find it very interesting about you when you mention about the Islamic perspective, that now has been developing more and more. And I think it will be a very interesting topic for future lectures, about the Islamic perspective, maybe on psychopathology. So moving on, maybe there are other participants that want to ask some questions. Again, you can raise your hand or write it down in the chat box, please.
So your students are of undergraduate level or postgraduate level?
The students here are from the undergraduate program.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can understand. No one is asking question. No problem.
No, maybe they're just shy. Yeah. If you're not sure how to ask questions in English, you can also send question in Indonesian, and we can try to translate it for Prof. Iqbal. No problem. Yeah. Yes, kalau ada pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia, silakan ditanyakan juga, nanti akan saya bantu untuk translate untuk Prof. Iqbal. I just told the students again that they can also ask in Bahasa Indonesia because some of them are shy to talk or write in English. Okay, so still no questions?
No problem. No problem.
Yeah. So if I may, I have another question, Prof. Iqbal.
Yeah, sure.
Do you mind? Yeah. Yeah. So you've talked about psychodynamics, but you've talked more earlier about biological paradigms and psychopathology, and as a person who studied psychology, we here in this meeting, the students are from psychology program. We have some limitations in understanding medical sciences, because we are from psychology sciences. But we cannot deny that there are biological explanations to psychological problems, psychological disorders. But now, if we know that that we do not really have the knowledge or the experts to do something biological to help people with mental disorders, then what do you think that we can do with this knowledge about biological explanations of psychopathology? For example, if you know that people with depression might have some problems with their neurotransmitters, then what can we do about that as a psychology students?
Because remember, I have discussed this explanation, separately. So in reality, what you find, you cannot separate them. For example, suppose there is some purely psychological cause. There is a death of some loved one, maybe parents. After that, it will influence us. The event is psychological. But again, this psychological event will produce the effect by changing the physiology of the body. And again, if there is a neurotransmitter imbalance, it can be corrected either by medication and by our way of thinking. So remember also, it is not necessary that it is a one-way process, even if we find the imbalance of neurotransmitter. Rather, because of the disturbed thinking, this imbalance might have occurred. Because I was short of time, I did not explain all these things. I repeat once again, if someone has found that in this illness that there is a imbalance of some chemical, whether it is hormonal imbalance or it is neurotransmitter imbalance, it is not necessary that in the beginning it was the cause. It is quite possible when we have discovered it, when person has already developed the problem. So when person has already developed the problem, it is quite possible because of the disturbed behavior, this change has occurred. So again, there are two ways. Either we can use this, imbalance. To correct this imbalance, we can use medication, or we through psychotherapy or change of thinking, we can correct it. But personally, I believe if behavior has become very disturbed, very serious, So in the beginning, we need medication so that person can be stable. Then we can use psychotherapy. Unless the real cause of the problem is removed, we cannot remove the problem based on biological viewpoint alone, based on medication alone. It is the experience of many. So ideal combination is, it is the dominant thinking, combination of medication and psychotherapy. But again, there are some studies which are showing psychotherapy alone is more effective. And again, psychotherapy also change the behavior through changing the physiology of the body, changing the brain function, changing the neurotransmitter or chemical activity. So either you change the chemical activity through medication, or again, interestingly, through thinking or psychotherapy. It can be done. And there are studies, even hypnosis also produce the effect in the same. So it is not necessary because the imbalance of neurotransmitter problem has occurred. Because of the problem, imbalance might have occurred. It is known as, it is a two-way process.
Okay, thank you. That is very interesting. Yeah, so we should never just use one paradigm to understand a case, so to say. Yeah, we should use like a holistic approach to a case to understand why a psychopathology happened. Yeah. And psychology does have like a contribution, even though the explanation of psychopathology might be biological in nature. Yeah, thank you, Prof. Iqbal, for your response.
One point only, one point.
Yes.
Yes, theoretically it is possible. In some cases, in the beginning, there was a bodily malfunction. And in other cases, primarily, it was sociocultural or psychological factor. But again, sociocultural and psychological factor will also produce effect by changing the physiology or functioning of the body.
Yeah, so it's two-way processes. Yeah.
It is a two-way process.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Is there any other questions from the participant already? Again, if you have questions, you can ask it in English or in bahasa Indonesia. Kalau misalnya punya pertanyaan, nanti akan saya bantu translate. Or even better, you can raise your virtual hand via the feature raising hand and ask it away directly to Prof. Iqbal. Okay, Prof. Iqbal, I have one question coming to my private message from one of the participants. The participant asked in bahasa Indonesia, yeah. So what do you think is the psychotherapy or psychological intervention for schizophrenia if we have if we use the psychodynamic paradigm? What should we do with people with schizophrenia if we are using that perspective?
Remember, in schizophrenia, psychotherapy can be used only as a supportive therapy. So basically, medication is used in this. It can be used as a supportive. These days, many approaches are being used here. Family therapy is also being used. Cognitive behavioral, it is also being used. And in the past, when psychodynamic was used, it was also very common. So here you need to understand, suppose we have applied therapy, and after that, we have change has occurred. So question arises, if we ask the question critically, why change has occurred? One question in one answer in our mind, because we have applied this technique. It is not necessary. Other approach is known as common factor approach. When client and therapist meet, so in addition to the technique which we are applying, Other factors are also important in therapeutic outcome. It is known as common factor approach. So what I'm trying to convey, use any approach, you will find it is producing change. So maybe some other time we will discuss it, because I will need some time to explain that. So it is known as common factor approach, and it is more important. And remember also, Carl Rogers was one of the first psychologists who had identified that. He had said in therapeutic outcome, technique is less important. What is more important? Some other factors. And he had identified the therapeutic relationship between client and therapist. We should have 3 different characteristics. One more thing very interesting. I don't know how many of you are aware. We assume all this psychotherapy has been developed by the West. We are following. Yes, in the modern time after Renaissance, we are following. You will be surprised to know it was Muslim medieval thinker in the 9th century, more than 1000 years ago. Al-Balkhi at-Tabari, they have developed this. So I have mentioned about that. Al-Hazan, he was considered the father of science, even the father of experimental, psychology. So one paper we have published, it is under review. Again, it will be there. So many of the scientific development, it took place in Muslim medieval time. There were many Muslim medieval thinkers. Even the first mental hospital of the world, it was established in 792 in Baghdad, according to one of the author, Carson and Butchers. You will find in his Abnormal Psychology book. In the same book, you will also find about Ibn Sina. To Ibn Sina, they write Avicenna. He had written one encyclopedia, and they mention one book. It is known as the Canon of Medicine. The same book, Abnormal Psychology, written by Carson, Butcher et al., they have mentioned about Canon of Medicine that perhaps it is one of the most widely read medical work ever written. I repeat, perhaps it is one of the most widely read medical work ever written. All the medical work which have been written today, it is perhaps one of the most widely read. Remember the context? That time Spain was ruled by Muslim. So as we have prescribed, Western texts in our universities, in the same way, Europe medical colleges have prescribed Arabic texts. And the Canon of Medicine was prescribed text for more than 500 years. Unfortunately, most of us are not aware. So in psychology, psychosomatic, most of this development, this explanation, treatment, psychotherapy, they were developed by Muslim medical thinkers. Yes, after Renaissance, West has contributed a lot. So wherever they have contributed, I duly acknowledge. But what is unfortunate, the scientific development, including psychological development, which took place in the medieval period Muslim world, most of them are not acknowledging. Yes, some honest European are acknowledging, and they are right. And from their writing, I came to know about all these things. So use any therapy, whether it is cognitive behavioral, family therapy, most of these therapy are effective. Why they're effective? One approach, because we are applying technique. Second approach, no, some other factor operates. So it will take some time, therefore I am skipping. So there is one book, Abnormal Psychology, written by Comer. So taken together all the therapies, according to that book, according to many researchers, technique factor contributing only 15%, 1.5 only, taken together. Maximum change is occurring due to some factor in client's life, including social support. Then client-therapist relationship, they have identified the factor also, and how much they are contributing in therapeutic outcome taken together. It is not so we are using cognitive behavioral psychodynamic, and because of that technique change is occurring. Yes, it is quite possible. But other factors are playing more important role in therapeutic outcome. So if we understand critically, then we come to know different explanation.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, that was very interesting what you said about the Western intervention has originally developed in the Muslim world. Yeah, that is very interesting. And I see here Bufalina has raised her hand. Please, Bufalina, if you want.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Nido, for and then thank you very much also for Professor Naved Iqbal for your explanation, especially for the last part. I'm really interesting that I also learned about Al-Balkhi. He is the founder of CBT, and I don't know why it's not very popular right now, because in Indonesia also we learn about a Western perspective. So my question is maybe it's a bit sensitive, but I'm very curious about as a psychologist, how can we differentiate for LGBT cases, for lesbian guy cases? Is it from genetic perspective or for environmental perspective? As a psychologist, how can we differentiate it? Yeah, because um, our judgment, our fundamental information will help us to give the next treatment, I guess. So, what is the wise judgment to differentiate these cases based on genetic or based on environment? Thank you, Professor.
Before that, we must keep in mind, we assume we are studying psychology, abnormal psychology, and it is based on so-called objective knowledge, based on researches, based on scientific discovery. Unfortunately, it is not so. Political and cultural factor also influence it. Earlier, homosexuality was included in the official list of classification of abnormal behavior. But during 1960s, it was removed from the official list of abnormal behavior. Why it was removed? Not because we have got some scientific facts, mainly because of the protest of gay and this lesbian or this homosexual community. Because of their protests, it was removed. And moreover, also, psychology, we assume it is science, it is value free. No, it is not value free. They are promoting some other value which are based on their view. So let me give one other example, then I will come back to your point. Starting from 2007, it was I was appearing in so many Indian TV channels for discussing psychological problem, homosexuality, and so many other psychological problems. I think we can openly discuss because this question is asked. So one question was asked whether we can have sex with anyone or not. So most of the so-called Western trained psychologists, they were suggesting, yes, we can have as long as both are willing. If there are two consenting adults, they are willing, we must have it. I have always expressed the view, no, it is not so simple. Because in some societies, sexual behavior is dependent or, guided by the cultural and religious belief. So what I'm trying to convey, we are promoting their view unconsciously or consciously, we are not aware. Because it is based on some other moral view. They have proposed some other moral, therefore they are proposing. Same applies to homosexuality theory. So most often they are suggesting it is because of genetic factor, it is orientation. Some people have heterosexual orientation, other people have homosexual orientation. I do not agree with all this theory. As I have already mentioned, genetic factors at the most can predispose us toward vulnerability. It cannot directly result in behavior. It depends on so many factors. It depends on, I mean to say, so many factors are operating here. Again, the will of the person who is indulging in such type of behavior. And some people also thought that who are having homosexual orientation, it cannot be changed. But some studies are suggesting it can be changed. So common Western model is, yes, it is orientation. If you have this orientation, you can accept it. It is nothing wrong. So what I have tried to convey, not only with this view, even in other view, they are promoting their own ideas, their own view. In some cases, it clashes with our own viewpoint. So therefore, in one paper I have written, most of psychological theories or our view which we have developed, either it is un-Islamic or anti-Islamic. So it is very, yes, from mainstream psychology perspective, it is one orientation. If someone is having that orientation, we must have it. And they are promoting such type of view based on genetic studies. So personally, I do not agree because there are many factors operating and it is very complex. Because my view is guided by cultural belief and religious belief also. Because I am fully aware, so-called all this scientific knowledge, it is also guided by some other view, political view, cultural view is also affecting. It is not based on purely scientific view. One more thing, this question of objectivity, we assume that we are purely objective because I have discussed the view of some briefly, Thomas Kuhn, Popper, Lakatos, and Feyerabend. What science is and how does it progress? Again, you will find, diversity view of science. Whatever we are gathering, it is not based on objectivity. Yes, most of the time we are objective. It is the notion of old science. In new science, it is said pure objectivity is a myth. And only in some approaches, it is the question. So what I'm trying to convey, we are receiving knowledge. We think it is objective knowledge. Subjective factors are also operating. How subjective factors operate in scientific investigation? One of the way is through paradigm or model, because we are studying any phenomena through paradigm or model. It is one of the way how subjective factor enter. Point is the same. Why do people develop depression? But people holding different paradigm, focusing on different part. So my view is all this theory, no doubt, most of this is based on objective knowledge. Yes, sometimes their cultural beliefs are also entering. So I have to see whether it is right or not. And one more thing, what they were saying 50 years back and what they are saying, it is not the same. And definitely what they are teaching right now, after 20 years, again, they will sing. So there is one verse of Quran. There are some people who mislead others without any knowledge. So same example I'm finding it.
Okay, thank you very much for your comprehensive explanation, Professor Iqbal.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Fali, also for the questions. And I have received yet another private message question, Prof. Iqbal.
Can you stop for a minute, please? Because yeah, my examination is going on. There is some confusion. Let me clarify that. It will take hardly 1 minute.
Yes, sure. Can you explain a bit about how can we help people with mental disorders according to this perspective? Yeah.
First thing, let me give the context of background, then I will come to the question. Because when we study mainstream psychology, it is very useful. It has a wide application in almost all the areas. Fine. Therefore, it is being used. It is very popular scientific discipline. But when we examine it closely, and remember also, these Western psychologists have realized it. When we examine it closely or at deeper level, then we find some problem. And these Western psychologists have identified different problems. And there is one of my paper, which I have already written on Islamic perspective. It is available on my ResearchGate page. So those who are interested, they can see, because here I will not be able to explain in detail. I have linked with that mainstream psychology is applicable, useful, but it has some such and such limitation according to Western psychologists themselves. In order to overcome that, they are developing different viewpoints. So one of the limitation is that they have ignored the spirituality completely, spirituality. So this Islamic perspective psychology is trying to fill that gap. Not only Islamic perspective to psychology, but many perspective is coming. In Western psychology, there is one approach, transpersonal psychology. It is coming up because it is trying to make the contention or assumption that our existence is beyond ourselves. So they are using the word transpersonal self, transcendent. Transpersonal self is sophisticated word for soul. And transcendence is the sophisticated word for God or related power. So some religious-based approaches are also coming based on Christian viewpoint, Hindus viewpoint, Buddhist viewpoint. So we have also started developing based on Islam. So first of all, we try to give this context, then explain how it can be done. Remember also, as I have already mentioned, Muslim medieval thinkers were the earliest psychotherapists. They have used psychotherapy and they have widely used. Imam Ghazali, all these Al-Balkhi, At-Tabari, Ibn Sina, they have treated. So there are some views which are based on Imam Ghazali viewpoint. They have developed their model, and in different parts of the world, they have started utilizing it. In UK, Turkey, Pakistan, they have started developing that. Some have started developing based on some other. So remember also, it was the Muslim medieval thinker who had started. Yes, they did not call it psychology. You call it ilmul nafsiyat. And remember, it was the part of all the medical diseases, because that time psychology was not being discussed separately. So have developed the technique, and that viewpoint, some modern thinker or some modern psychotherapist who are trained in clinical psychology, because I know Rashid Skinner is my friend based in UK. He was trained in Jungian therapy. Now he has started using Ghazali therapy, and he's saying, Ghazali therapy is more effective than the Jungian therapy. So some people have started developing it. But one more thing, word of caution. I do not dismiss all the Western viewpoint. So what is my view? I find that these are the remarkable development made by Western psychologists or Western thinkers. We must duly acknowledge it. But here there is problem or limitation. And we can overcome this limitation by such and such. Remember, they have developed some useful theory, and sometimes it also helps us. So in that paper, I have also mentioned knowledge of Western psychology, mainstream psychology is necessary for developing Islamic psychology. Not only the knowledge of mainstream psychology, second important, the limitation of mainstream psychology also, and what alternative view have been developed. Unfortunately, we follow all this theory blindly. We think it does not have any problem. Whatever they have said, we have to apply it blindly. I disagree with that. I find, yes, it is useful up to here. Up to here, it has problem. And from Islamic source, we can do it. For example, all these models do not acknowledge our, non-material reality. Yes, according to Bethlehem, those who are interested, Bethlehem was one clinical psychologist, probably mental health professional, who was also Jew, who had worked with for some time with Sigmund Freud. He was also sentenced in concentration camp. In 1982 and 83, at some place it is 82, in some other place it is 1983. Freud's and Man's Soul. It is the title of the book he has written. And he has said that originally Freud has used the expression soul, but his original writing probably was in German. Probably this word is Seele. In English translation, this essence has not come. It is translated only as a mind. So with the exception of Freud, because Bethlehem has said, most of the mainstream psychologists have not discussed directly about this, because we know we have non-material reality, nafs. We are also connected to Allah. If we are praying to Allah, connected to Him and following His will, we have different type of behavior, and definitely our difficulties, He also is our difficulty also. So this link they completely disregard, neglect. So when they are not proposing complete model of the man, so how they can propose comprehensive theory? They cannot propose comprehensive theory because their model of man is incomplete. We have inner impulses also. We have nafs. We are also connected to Allah. Allah guide us. Allah gave us sakina. And there are so many occasions Allah guide us. So all these things, unfortunately, they do not realize. So here we can take the help from Islam, because we know it is Furqan, because one of the words for Quran is Furqan. Yes, Furqan was also used for Torah. Furqan means criterion for separating right from wrong. So I have expressed in my lecture, not only differentiating religious belief, but all the available knowledge. We can use Quran as a Furqan. For example, there is a view in psychology, whether our nature is positive or negative. Again, from Quran, we can use it as a Furqan or criterion. We have both these aspects. Whether dreams can be true or not, whether it can be prophetic or not. Yes, we have clue from Quran. Whether tension can affect our health or not. Again, from Quran, we can get it. And there are so many examples which are applicable to psychology also. So I'm a person who want to take help from there. Yes, at the same time, I do not criticize all the Western. Yes, I find it is useful up to here. But here again, they have limitation. And remember, I have not pointed out this limitation. These limitation or criticism have been pointed out by Western psychologists themselves. So they're trying to compensate from their own way. I'm trying to compensate from my Islamic way. So this is my view.
Okay, thank you for your answer, for Prof. Iqbal. So there he goes. Yeah, I forgot the name of the person who asked the questions, but I hope that it answers your questions. Yeah, and I think it is, because that was a very comprehensive answer to the questions. And yeah, so I wish that we could have some more time to continue with our discussion, but unfortunately it is already 8 to 3 p.m. here in Indonesia, so we have to end our session here today. But thank you for all the questions that have been sent to us, and also to Prof. Iqbal, who have answered all of the questions wonderfully. Before I wrap up the session today, let me summarize what we have discussed so far today. So today, Prof. Iqbal explained about 2 different paradigms in psychology to explain mental disorders. The first one is the biological model or paradigm, And uh, overall, according to this perspective, psychopathology will be explained through the role of neurotransmitter, hormonal imbalance, brain abnormality, and genetic factors. But we should also be aware of its limitation because of it is reductionistic in nature. And later on, earlier, Prof. Iqbal also mentioned, although briefly, about the psychodynamic paradigms of psychopathology and how this perspective rooted from the Freud's perspective in psychology, and he would explain psychopathology in terms of the dynamics between the unconscious, preconscious, and conscious level of mental, and also the role of id, ego, and superego in creating anxiety. And has developed some techniques, yeah, including dream analysis, free association, and also hypnosis to help people with mental disorder, even though he abandoned hypnosis eventually. And we have also a lengthy discussion about some other topics and throughout our discussion, interestingly, the talk about Islamic perspective in psychology came up, and I think that is there is an area that I think a lot of people here in Indonesia would like to know more. So maybe that's an idea for another session with Prof. Iqbal, maybe in the future. But unfortunately, today we have to end the session here. Yeah, but before we wrap up this session today, I would like to ask Prof. Iqbal for some brief conclusive remarks, if you would. Prof. Iqbal, what take-home message or conclusion would you like to give to our students here related to what we have discussed so far?
Only one message: continue reading, continue updating. It will broaden your horizon. Because there is one effect, it is known as Dunning-Kruger effect. Less you know, more certain you are. More you know, less certain you become. Continuously upgrade yourself. This is the only message.
Fantastic. Thank you, Prof. Iqbal, for the kind words. Yeah, that is very interesting. Continue reading, continue updating. Yeah. Be aware of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Yeah, we actually have a saying here in Indonesia, Prof. Iqbal, about that phenomenon. Yeah, we said like the people who know nothing will speak the loudest. It goes something like that. Yeah. So I think
one comment only.
Yes.
I want to add. I also follow it. Not only I am giving this message to a student, I will also try to update myself as much as possible, because I also follow this approach.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Wonderful. Yeah. So now one last thing, Prof. Iqbal. In Indonesia, no public lectures or seminars is complete without a photo session at the end of the event. So I would like to invite everyone in this Zoom meeting to turn on the camera for a minute or two. We are going to take some snapshot as a remembrance to today's great session. So please hold your best smile. Okay, so please turn on your camera for a bit now, so we can take some pictures. Yeah, I will give some moment for everybody to maybe be ready, tidy up some things. Please, guys, we turn on your camera if you can, because we are going to take some snapshots. Mrs. Valina, can you help me with the screenshotting?
Okay.
Okay.
So there are 4 slides, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you, Mr. Nido.
Thank you, Mrs. Valina, and also everyone who turned on the camera. Yeah, the further session marks the end of our meeting today. Once again, thank you for Prof. Iqbal, our amazing speaker for today's insightful talk and discussion. Thank you to Faculty of Psychology and UNER for making the session possible. Also for all the students and all the participants for your participation and questions throughout the event. And I would like to apologize for any limitation or inconvenience during the event. I hope that we will have more opportunities to see each other again, hopefully in person. Yeah, Prof. Iqbal, maybe you can come Indonesia in the future. And I will end the session today here. Please stay healthy, please stay safe. Once again, thank you for attending to the lecture. Goodbye, everyone. Have a nice day ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. I have enjoyed interacting with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
Prof.
Professor
Iqbal.
Iqbal.